From the time of his hatching, he was different. A potentially brilliant scholar who dreaded the structured environment of school. He educated himself in the streets, taking whatever work was available, formulating his philosophy of self from what he had learned of the world about him. And then the cosmic axis shifted, and that world changed. Suddenly, he was stranded in a universe he could not fathom. Without warning, he became a strange fowl in an even stranger land. Welcome to the one, and for some reason only, podcast about Marvel Comics' greatest talking duck, Howard the Duck, trapped in a world he never made, hosted by myself, Noel, who's loved Howard since he was a kid.
And me, Russell, who's not new to comics, but is new to Howard. We go through a couple issues from Howard's Marvel comic book history with some creator backgrounds, storied histories, and the weird world of 1970s comic books to today's. Get ducked up in a world he never made.
Trapped in a World, the Howard the Duck podcast.
Wow!
Proud members of the collective.
See this episode's show notes for our unique promo code to get up to 2 months of free podcasting service with Libsyn when you sign up for a new account. Get your show on Apple and Spotify. Get helpful stats and all the support you need to sound your very best.
Yes, welcome back, Looney listeners. You are listening to Into the Night, the Moonlight podcast. This is episode 303, and you are with your High Priest Khonshu Ray. Greetings all. And for this episode, I will be traversing the comics solo. I haven't done it in a while. So, in a weird way, although it feels like late night radio, it's not live streamed. It feels kind of fun. Maybe I'm just a hermit by nature. But anyway, welcome everyone. As mentioned, episode 303. At the time of this recording, it is a waning crescent. So if you look up into the night sky, you will see a waning crescent in the night sky. And that means we will be looking at our LUNAR-PICK Classic Run review. It's been a while since we've done this, so that probably adds to the excitement of doing this episode. And for this episode, we'll be doing Moonlight, Volume 1, Issue 21. As mentioned, I am without Rebecca, and I am going solo, but I'm never alone because I always want to thank all the Patroonies and all the Looney listeners as well. So a huge thank you to all the Patroonies, as well as our principal sponsors, Odin Sword, Drew Terms, Daniel Doing, and Frank the Think Tank. Would like to also thank, of course, our other sponsors, CLZ Comics at Collectors and Dreamland Comics from Schoenberg, Illinois. So with just your faithful High Priest Ray here to guide you through this episode, I want to kick off with some white noise. Only a few bits of news. I've done a little bit of trawling through the internet, not for reasons that you may think. Get your mind out of the gutter. It's for Moonlight news. And the first bit of news I came across was unfortunately a little bit disappointing. Apparently there is confirmation from the director of Werewolf by Night, that's a one-shot special on Disney Plus, going to be released early October. Director Michael Giacchino, he confirmed that there'll be no plans for any sort of crossover with Moonlight and Werewolf by Night, which is a little bit disappointing because we do know their history together. We do know that's where it all began, basically, at Werewolf by Night, issue 32. Would be really cool to see that kind of reference on screen. But from what I've read in an article, Michael Giacchino has confirmed that, and this might be a backhanded little scoop for a Moonlight Season 2, but he says that there are no plans going ahead for Werewolf by Night to appear in any future seasons or Season 2 of Moonlight. So I may have worded that wrong, that the article may have worded it wrong. That may mean that there is a season 2 coming. I mean, let's all hope so. But unfortunately, there won't be an appearance by Jack Russell. Incidentally, and the boys over at Werewolf by Night, a big hello to Jacob and Malcolm. Not Jacob and Malcolm. To Matthew and Jacob. Maybe it's because of your surname, Jacob. But a big shout out to those boys, because it seems that Werewolf by Night is ticking all the boxes and is getting rave reviews. I've not been spoiled by anything. I've just seen some titles to some articles and basically saying that Werewolf by Night is better than Moonlight, which is a big call, if you'd ask me. But that's actually very encouraging too. And just saying that it's really the first deep dive into Marvel's monster corner of their universe, and it's just getting rave reviews, like the violence and just in general the whole production, the very classic look of the homage to Universal horror kind of monsters. Personally, I can't wait to see Jack Russell and Elsa Bloodstone, and the fact that Ulysses Bloodstone is there. For those that have not heard the rumor or the speculation, the desiccated kind of corpse in the coffin that addresses the monster hunters, apparently that's Ulysses, which is pretty cool. So anyway, I've gone off on a bit of a tangent already, but apparently, yes, Werewolf by Night is the shizzle, as the young folk like to say. I'm very out of touch. I'm a bit of an old fogey. So, yeah, excited to see that. And I think it's October 4th or October 7th. So keep your eyes peeled on Disney+. I'll be watching it as soon as it drops at a convenient and at an appropriate time as well for me, which I think it does fall well for Australians. So I might be able to see that around 6 or 7 o'clock in the evening. But yeah, that is one of the main bits of news, a bit of white noise. The other one, of course, is that Moonlight, the Epic Collection Volume 4, Butcher's Moon, has been released. So those with the pre-orders, you may be receiving them now, or if you've gone to your LCS, you may have already picked up your sweet, sweet copy. I have seen photos floating around. I'm not sure if in our Facebook group or community, but I do recall in the Epic Collection Facebook group that I'm in, I think a few people, especially Curtis, has been very happy to receive their copy of Butcher's Moon. Yeah, I've pre-ordered it as well. I think it's coming sometime in October, so can't wait. I mean, it covers, gosh, what would it cover? Let me just double check for you. I didn't. It actually is the first time that a bit of Mark Spector Moonlight will be collected in some form, in some trade. So that's pretty exciting. Let me just quickly go back here and check out what I can. Yeah, so I'll be looking forward to that. Let me just quickly. It's not helping me at all. Moonlight Epic Collections. Yes. So from here, it looks like it will include Moonlight 1 to 6. So that's the Fist of Khonshu from 1985. It will include Marvel Team Up from 1972, 144. From memory, I think that's the one with the Purple Man and Spider-Man and Iron Fist and Luke Cage and Daredevil. It will also include Marvel Fanfare 1982. That's issue 30. And again, from memory, I think that's when he meets Gaia or Mother Earth. It's a really cool cover. Definitely check it out if you haven't, or just get the Epic Collection. And it has the first 7 issues of Mark Spector Moon Knight, which is bloody awesome, as well as material from Solo Avengers 3 and Marvel Fanfare 38 and 39, and Marvel Superheroes 1, which I think we have already covered. We've covered Solo Avengers 3, Marvel Fanfares, I think we've covered them, and Marvel Superheroes, which was the spring special. You'd be able to hear that on one of our regular episodes, but for Patroonies, you'd probably know that Justin and I covered all the backup stories in some subsequent consecutive bonus episodes exclusive for Patroonies. So Moonlight, the Epic Collection, Volume 4, that's released. Very excited indeed. And finally, I found this, which has got me just as excited. Now, for those that have been following Daredevil, or do collect the series at the moment by Chip Zdarsky, I do have it. I haven't read issue 3 yet, but apparently issue 3 hints at this big battle that Daredevil will have with the Punisher. So we know the Punisher is he's like the right hand man for the Hand or something. He's up there. He's been controlled by the Beast. I don't think he's the leader of the Hand. I'm not collecting the Punisher series, but he's working, within the Hand. So Daredevil is going to cross paths with him, but the exciting thing also is that it seems that Moonlight will be jumping into the fray. And from the article I read, and I'll try to get this in the show notes, it appears that he may have to choose a side. And I think it alludes to him being the good cop to Daredevil's bad cop. But that's really inappropriate for Moon Knight. So it might be bad cop, it seems. But very exciting. So we like to do our Night Watch as well. We've been trying to cover that. Just our previous episode, 302 with Rebecca, we did cover all the cameo appearances. So this might be the start of another whole bundle of Moon Knight appearances in other comics. Hopefully he'll have a substantial role. And I just can't wait to see Chip Zdarsky kind of write him and Mark Gicchetto draw him. That will be so cool. So so keep your eyes out. We'll keep our eyes out on it as well. Loonies, please share any info that you have. But it looks like Daredevil issue 4 onwards, or you may even want to pick up Daredevil issue 3. It has, for the completionists, it has mention of Moon Knight. And I haven't read it yet. I said he might turn up. I don't know if he actually appears in the issue, but it's worth checking out. So that's pretty much the news that I could gather for this week. Nothing too kind of involved or too big. Like we haven't got another anthology series for Moon Knight. He's back to his one series, but he is popping up, as I mentioned just then, in some other series. So, the awareness for Moon Knight is still out there, an after effect of the TV show, no doubt. So I think let's head on to our LUNAR-PICK classic run review. And as mentioned, we're going to be looking at Volume 1, Issue 21. Now, we're lucky. There are like 2 stories here. There's a nice full story called Master of Night Earth. So this was released 30th of March 1982 with a cover date of July 1982. So we have the main story, Master of Night Earth, and a little bit of a change in the lineup. Writer Doug Moench, of course, but we have a penciler, a new penciler, I think just for this issue. I think we returned to Bill's work in 22, but penciler Vincent Alcázar, with 2 inkers here, and I'll talk a bit about that later. John Tartaglione and Bob Camp. We have colorist Christie Scheele, letterer Irv Watanabe, and editor Denny O'Neill. So that was the main story, and following that we have Tales of Khonshu, Murder by Moonlight. So this was a fun little ditty, and I'll cover this briefly after the chat about Master of Night Earth, because it's a shorter story. I don't know if there's that much to go into it, but I'll try to cover it as best as I can. Writer Alan Zelenetz, penciler Greg LaRocque, inker Dave Simons, colorist Christie Scheele, letterer Diana Albers, and again editor Denny O'Neill. Now, this comic is available in many versions. Of course, floppy version, which these days, because of the TV show, it might cost you a little bit more than what you'd expect, or you might find it in a bargain bin for all you lucky US listeners, lucky comic book fans. So it's in floppy format, it's in a digital format, and that also means you can buy it from Kindle, but also you can view it on Marvel Unlimited. It's also in an Epic collection, the Moonlight Epic Collection Volume 2, Shadows of the Moon. I think it's right towards the end there. I think that Epic ends around about issue 23. So it's towards the end. It's in, I read it, in the Moonlight Omnibus. That's volume 2 of the Omnibus. It's actually the very first issue from that Omnibus. Just thought I'd give it a go, having a read on the nice, vibrant colours and to me, what seems to be larger than normal pages, which is always fun to read comics when they're just a little bit bigger. And finally, it's also available in that black and white kind of newspaper stock from the Essential Collection, which is out of print, but if you've got it on your shelf and you want to read it in that format, it's in volume 2. So go check that out. As always, for listeners who may not be familiar, we've been doing this for a lot of the newer comics, of course. As I said, it's been ages since we've done or we've gone back to the classic run or even like earlier modern run reviews. But what we usually do, we'll go through a bare bones or a synopsis, and this time provided by a Wiki, Wiki. And then what I will do is I'll go through some key aspects of the story, things that really made up the story, and followed by some notes. And I actually do have notes this episode to talk about, and that ranges from the writing, the plot, the art, the layout, themes, characterizations, and references to past or future runs, I'm going to say. And I'll cap all this off with a rating out of 10 from the Khonshu's rating system. So let's get underway. Here is issue 21, The Master of Night Earth. Moonlight accepts a job to fight against a terrorist coup in Haiti. He meets and hooks up with Brother Voodoo there, who has reason to believe the terrorists are tied to an outbreak of zuvembies he's been fighting. Moonlight eventually finds out the governor who hired him was also the terrorists' leader and just wanted to throw off suspicion while he arranged a coup from within the government. He also reveals himself as Grand Bois, commander of the Zuvembies. Moonlight and Brother Voodoo work together to break the corpse's link with the evil Loa animating them, which in turn loses Grand Bois the loyalty of his living soldiers, whose dead ancestors he had been holding in his thrall. With the villain defeated, Moonlight agrees to return his payment, which was illegally taken from the Haitian treasury. So that was a very quick synopsis. I felt it didn't really cover everything, but basically, as you heard, Moonlight is in Haiti on a contracted job to, foil some terrorists' plans. He meets up with Brother Voodoo. There's some cool zombie action along the way, and he, as the synopsis says, it turns out that Giscard, his contractor, was actually the villain in a twist, and he's kind of undone with the team up of Moonlight and Brother Voodoo. Yeah, so overall impressions, what I thought this was a very cool, I guess, issue. I always like how Moonlight goes overseas and is not just bound to the US. It really does make him a global kind of superhero. And although, I love the likes of Jed MacKay's run at the moment, all set in New York, by having him overseas and here, it just reminded me of course, the some of the issues earlier on in Volume 1, but also in Mark Spector as well, in Fist of Khonshu, that sort of thing. It just gives them a different flavour. In this instance, there is really an absence of Khonshu, and I guess that aspect of Moon Knight's, character, but that is by no way really made apparent, or is there a void because the lack thereof of it. I think the cool exotic backdrop of Haiti and the fact that we get zombies, which incidentally I will call out already, we had seen earlier in the year before, 1981, in Moonlight issue 6. He fights zombies there. They were referred to as zuvembies also, which again I found an interesting point. I'll get to that later. But yeah, it was really good. There were some inconsistencies that did kind of influence how I saw the issue as a whole, and there were bits of the writing there from Moench, which I thought was uncharacteristic, and it may be just like a flourish from Moench, and also the artwork. I think this gentleman's name, I think Vincent Alcázar, did a really good job. The inkers, though, were very apparent, and maybe I'll just jump to... I'll jump to that note straight away. I mean, art-wise, I thought it was quite, not jarring, but very noticeable, the differences in inking styles between Tartaglione and Bob Camp. There is very much a more standard vibe, and I'm gonna go out on a limb and assume that it's John Tartaglione. I could be absolutely wrong, and then that's kind of juxtaposed, and there doesn't seem to be any intention to use a different artwork for various aspects. Like we've seen it, the big example is in the Lemire run where he uses Greg Smallwood, Wilfred Torres, James Stokoe, Francesco Francavilla. Their different artworks within the issues and within the arc were used in great effect because they're meant to be different kind of environments. Over here in this issue 21, it seems just random that perhaps, I'm assuming, Alcázar penciled everything, and I guess they just gave a bunch of pages to Bob Camp and a bunch of pages to John Tartaglione. So it kind of chops and changes a bit with the inking. I don't have too much of an issue with the actual inking as well. I mean, I'm assuming it's Bob Camp's, and to me it actually looks like more of an underground independent kind of comic book art, with his really heavy ink lines and his kind of rough textures and shading, and very kind of stylized look. I didn't mind that at all, but it's just the fact that it is quite different from Tartaglione's inking, which looks more, it's more suited to, it's more akin to the standard comic book inker. It makes the figures, the backdrops a bit more realistic, and so yeah, I was kind of taken out a bit by just this inconsistency. But going back to the key points, I mean, the first key point for me is this team up with Brother Voodoo. And again, I think it's quite interesting. Brother Voodoo, look, he's a fringe character as well, and admittedly he's fringe similar to Moonlight, although now Moonlight's had a TV show and all that. It's his profile has risen. But I guess with Voodoo and zombies, the go-to would be Brother Voodoo as a team up kind of ally. But for the most part, I think he was done really well. I had, talking about some inconsistencies with the writing, there was one moment in it with Brother Voodoo that kind of was left up in the air. There was a moment of one of the 10 spits, I guess, or one of the peaks of the storyline where Moonlight and Brother Voodoo, the river forks off and they go, Moonlight and Frenchie goes down one branch of the river and Brother Voodoo goes down the other. Then Brother Voodoo kind of meets up with he canoes towards a waterfall, and Moonlight tries to save him because he's going to fall off the edge, and he's not worried, and he just disappears. But then he just mystically reappears again. And I know Brother Voodoo has powers and all that, but it just seemed a little too unresolved from Moench. It just seemed that writing Brother Voodoo to that point where he kind of falls off the waterfall seemed purposeless. It was on the nose. It's there to kind of create some tension, but it wasn't resolved. He just turns up again in a puff of smoke. So I thought that was a little bit weak with the writing. But overall, Brother Voodoo, I think he does really well. Of course, his brother Daniel is there. He has a big part in it too. He kind of possesses some of the terrorists, and that's the incentive for part of the incentive for Brother Voodoo and Moonlight to follow these terrorists. Moonlight is there contractually. Brother Voodoo is using his brother almost like a beacon to fight crime and do good. So his brother Daniel is there almost kind of like as a spider bug. That's how I kind of think of it, a kid. And Brother Voodoo is using his spider sense to get closer to the spider tracer. Sorry, not the spider bug. Yes, so Brother Voodoo was pretty cool, I thought. And again, worked really well. He had some good action. Even their Moonlight comments on, you've got to be more than just a guy that can do magic, because you certainly can handle yourself, with your fists. So Moonlight says, "Say, you're doing all right yourself, brother. Looks like you got other powers you ain't mentioned yet." And Brother Voodoo goes on to say, when his brother Daniel died, he actually gained the strength of two men. So he's not super strong like Spider-Man or I don't know who's slightly strong. Or Captain America even. I think Captain America is probably stronger, but he's got the strength of two men. So that's kind of amped up. One of the things, though, and just looking at that interaction with Moonlight and Brother Voodoo, again, with the writing, I'm going to say that there was some weird... actually, with characterizations, I'll put it under that. There's some weirdness going on with Moonlight. Now, I don't know whether Doug Moench is just having fun with it and he just wants to kind of add flourish to his writing. We know he writes really with a sense of lyricism and poetry. Quick example, the very beginning, it says, at first there was nothing but the creaking of heavy crates, the groaning of rotted wharf planks, the sibilant lapping of the murky river Artibonite, and the urgent whispering of revolutionary terrorists. This is the Doug Moench that we know and love. Yet I find that he has Moonlight's voice. Moonlight sounds to me more like Jake Lockley than the typical Moonlight Volume 1 kind of iteration of Moonlight, i.e., like Mark Spector. He just talks with a lot of, I don't know how to say it, jibe, or just a lot of jargon. Here, I'm just looking through here. Look, they're running faster than a clock at happy hour. And anything he says here, it says, I guess you heard my prize-winning monologue, Frenchie. So he's talking to Frenchie through his cowl. The birds have flown, so you might as well bring down the chopper to pick up. And then he talks about some drums that he hears. Real voodoo? You mean jungle hocus pocus? You can't be serious. Wait a minute. On second thought, maybe I better not scoff at the weirdo angels. He just has this kind of more playful, more kind of, I guess, street or casual way of talking, which maybe it's because I haven't read Volume 1 in a long time, but I'm pretty sure in the earlier issues he was a bit more straight-laced. He had a dry sense of humour, but this is almost can I say, almost like Ben Grimmie talking, kind of that kind of flashy talk. I'm trying to find another example here. Do you mind if say yeah as well? Instead of you, do you mind if I don't like the looks of him? What say we make him the dying dead? I got some razor sharp crescent darts here that'll, so he just talks in a really weird way. Okay, sorry, you've got to indulge me here. I'm just having fun with this. I was afraid of that. See how fast I'm catching on with this voodoo jazz? This one must have been dead quite a while. Skulls are as brittle as eggshell. So he talks really kind of lax, I think. And that kind of took me away a little from the Moon Knight that I know. And again, I could be absolutely wrong. Maybe he is kind of this fella. Maybe it's Jake taking over. But yeah, the voice of Moon Knight was very different for me. Speaking of, again, as I mentioned, Brother Voodoo, so Moon Knight ends up fighting zombies in Haiti with Brother Voodoo. And as mentioned, we have seen this before in issue 6, which was really cool. And it's a recurring theme as well. So I've actually pegged 7 years later in Mark Spector Moon Knight, there's issue 6 and 7, where again he fights zombies. So we've got that kind of supernatural element that harks all the way back to Werewolf by Night, and we've got this side of Moon Knight, and that's what I mentioned before about we take a back seat with the Egyptian deity side of things, and now we see this side, this facet, which is more the supernatural, and that's what I really like, I guess, mostly about this issue, is that we delve into that, to that kind of genre. So I mean, at the same time as well, it's still keeping its roots with Moon Knight being contracted and there being a potential coup d'etat in the Haitian government, and it's all about a head of security for the government being the villain at the end. So there are strong ties to his usual kind of adventures. Speaking of which as well, again, if I'm to go to the characterizations of Moon Knight, what I did again find quite striking in this was Moon Knight going back to his merc ways and almost embracing it. We see Mark relishing how he's been contracted and he's getting paid to hunt down these terrorists. If I can just find it as well. He just talks about, you might say that what I'm doing now, what I'm the very best at, and doing it by way of my identity as a costumed clown. I mean, he really pokes fun at himself even as well. And though I got money to burn, I don't mind picking up a little extra cash. So Brother Voodoo then says, then you were paid to come here to Haiti? And Moonlight then recalls, yeah, you might say so. And he recalls how he got how Giscard engaged his services. So Giscard being the head of security, essentially contracting Moon Knight to take out the terrorists, which is really quite a shifty and smart plan to cover his own tracks. So when it's revealed, and I'm going on to the other aspect here, when it's revealed that Giscard is the master of Night Earth and Night Forests, I mean, although it was kind of predictable, because a lot of the stories, I guess, of this time nowadays are quite predictable because I guess, storytelling has changed since then. It was still a cool twist, I thought. And the reasoning, behind why he's the villain, the fact that he's using Moon Knight as a smokescreen to take down these patsies that he's lined up as the terrorists who are working for him, to kind of like squash any thoughts that, so we've got the terrorists, it's all over, and then he can continue to bring down the government from within. I thought that was a pretty smart bit of storytelling there. Going back to Moon Knight fighting the zombies, I wanted to make a point as well of I found this interesting. So in issue 6 of volume 1, we get zombies very much referred to as zuvembies. And from what I read or what I understood, that was because Marvel couldn't use the term zombies here. And as I was reading this issue 21, you have Moonlight referring to the zombies as zombies. He calls them a zombie. And Brother Voodoo maintains that they are zuvembies. I guess what they're trying to do is there are different names for this type of creature. If you're from America or US, you'd probably term them zombies, but Brother Voodoo very much, or Haitians, I guess, refer to them as zuvembies. I think my speculation would be that apparently that kind of copyright or, trademark was taken down, because at first Moonlight says it once, but then he just repeats it over and over again. I think in one panel he says zombie about 3 times. This is another fine mess. Zombie men with zombie snakes coming out of their eyes, riding zombie alligators. They can't miss. And I don't know whether it's poking fun that, they can now use the word zombie, that Moench decides, okay, well, I'm going to really just overplay it. But I thought that was pretty fun, interesting point, since from what I understood, they weren't allowed to use it before. Bouncing back to the other aspect now of this card is the Master of Night, Night Earth. I did think there was a potential missed opportunity in the themes. I mean, as far as the themes of the story go, it's pretty cut and paste, right? Clear cut, or cut and paste, whatever. It's pretty clear cut in the fact that Moonlight goes over, but there's this, this struggle for power in the government, and there's a fun little romp with the supernatural zombies, and you get the cameo from a guest, which is pretty cool. I thought a theme which could have been explored, and maybe just there wasn't time to, was that Moonlight being the avatar of Khonshu, avatar of vengeance, going up against the Master of Night Earth. I was expecting some sort of showdown, even for the fact that towards the end there was mention that it's a full moon, and they need let me get it exactly here. He says, so he's got this kind of enchanted stone. He's got the skull Wungle suspended above, and apparently that kind of has some sort of mystical abilities. And he says the full moon will have traversed the sky to the sacred position of Guede Nimbo, and when its beams come through the skylight right behind you and fall upon the Wangled skull, then will my control over death be complete. So I thought full moon, like Mooney will have his strength up to full power as well. Surely there'll be some sort of reference to that, but I didn't see it. And there is a bit where he kind of snaps his bonds. Whether that's it, but it's very subtly done. There's not much to it. Also as well, he uses his truncheon to smash the Wangled skull, or tries to, shall I say. But yeah, it doesn't effectively show any kind of effect of the moon on Moonlight, which I thought was a bit of a missed opportunity. Now, also, just having a look, going back again to the art, I'm just checking my notes here. A point of difference I found with the inking was there was also a toing and froing of Moonlight's face, which was apparent. Very much so in again, I'm going to call it the Tartaglione inking. You get the black kind of face in the shadows over his in his hood. Whereas with the Bob Camp one, you get more of the classic Moonlight, where you really do see like the bigger eyes. You see the white mask that he wears, under his hood. So yeah, that sense as well, I think, played into the inconsistencies of this. Other points for writing, I've got here Frenchie and the Chopper. I thought that was really cool. We don't get it that much. Frenchie had, again, a bit of a backseat to this story, but he's referenced a lot. Like, Moonlight talks to him a lot. he only has a few lines. I think there was actually one line. I'm not even going to pretend to try and find it, where you get that, over-the-top French accent from Frenchie talking back. But another thing which I thought was really good... Oh, yeah, here, we mark. I see the skylight. That's towards the end. Another thing in that lead-up as well, apart from the... I'm going to say the atrocious mooncopter, which was used as a reference in the Houston Finch run, which looked way better. But anyway, we have the mooncopter, slightly phallic. I'm looking at the panel, and, if you know, you know. And the French uses machine guns. And I love this. Look, I'm not an advocate for violence or guns, but the mooncopter being more than just dropping down the rope ladder and just being a mode of transport, but being an offensive vehicle, I'm always all for, That was it in the Ellis run from memory, I think, as well as the Benson run as well, I think. Benson and Texera. It's great to see the guns come out, also in the Mark Sector Moon Knight run. But that proves pivotal in the fact that Moon Knight can't destroy that Wangle skull, but Frenchie, with incredible aim, gets a helicopter, manages to shoot through a dormer in the roof, shatter the glass, and smash the skull. He's got incredible aim. Call him Bullseye, call him Hawkeye, call him what you will. He's a saving grace. So, so then that pretty much kind of wraps it up. Giscard is taken away. As mentioned, there's something which does tie in from memory to, again, issue 6, where the ancestors of... the dead ancestors are used to blackmail people. So Giscard has used the dead ancestors to blackmail these people to be his soldiers. But once they kind of are finally put back to rest, there's no reason for his henchmen to be with Giscard, and so they depart as well, and he's taken away by the coppers. So yeah, that wraps up, I think, this issue, and giving it a moon rating, I'd give it, from Khonshu's system, a solid round boy. I'm going to give it a 7. I think I was going to give it lower because, unfortunately, I was impacted a little bit by the art and the toing and froing between inkers. But the story is fun enough as it is, and I think Brother Voodoo does a good job. We get some zombie fights. I mean, the action is kind of incidental. It's cool to see zombies with snakes coming out of their eye sockets, their skull eye sockets, and zombie alligators. It would have been cool to linger on them a bit more and just see zombies in action. But, for what it's worth, Moon Knight does his fair share, and he also does his kind of merc. It's a bit of a merc adventure as well, albeit in a stupid costumed clown guise. So 7 out of 10 for that. Anyway, let's take a quick break. I'm just going to have a little bit of a slurp to wet the whistle again. And when we come back, just a little bit of feedback in our quotation mark segment before we wrap up the show. So catch you soon.
Hello, I'm Anthony.
And I'm Dr. Issues.
And we're hosts of Capes on the Couch, the podcast where comics get counseling.
Superheroes don't always get to go home happy. That's where we come in.
We offer psychiatric and mental health analysis of comic book characters.
So check us out at capesonthecouch.live and across all social media platforms at Capes on the Couch.
Yes, welcome back, loony listeners. You are listening to Into the Night, the Moon Knight podcast. This is episode 303, and you are with your High Priest Khonshu Ray. And before we get into our listener feedback, I did forget the backup story, Tales of Khonshu, Murdered by Moonlight. So I won't go in as much depth into this one because it's only a fraction of the size of the first story. But essentially what happens in it is that, it opens up with some cops, and there's one of the cops has been shot by someone. which, has kind of kicks off the story in a cool fashion, and we get the murderer, Herb Russell, fleeing from the scene. He makes his way into the Brooklyn Museum, and as he kind of sneaks past, we get a bit of an insight. There's a lecture going on, and funnily enough, we kind of tune into that, and they talk about what it can't be new technology, but it just seems that this newfangled thing of X-raying mummies kind of gives more information, and we don't have to handle the mummies, but we can learn a lot about it. So this guy, Dr. Richard Mark, Dr. Dick Mark, is concluding an evening's lecture, and he says about, just the value of X-rays, and learning from it, and the value of this technology. Sets it up, kind of, you know what I mean? So we track back to Herb Russell. He kind of goes through the museum. He sees the statue of Khonshu, and then there's kind of interaction between the moon and Khonshu, and, the moonlight hits the Khonshu statue. Herb Russell gets really scared. Then he hears someone coming, so he hides in a coffin. And this actually reminded me of, I believe it was one of the Hulk magazine backup stories where this guy goes into like this Iron Maiden or something. But anyway, it's unrelated to that. So this guy hides in the sarcophagus of a mummy, and a security guard comes, and in true kind of like dark, macabre, stories, this guy, Herb, gets trapped in the sarcophagus, and I assume he just dies. He just like suffocates, and he's no more. The ending is just like really quick. Dr. Richard Mark comes up and contemplate more of the X-rays being taken, and one of the curators or examiners goes, "Oh my gosh, the mummy we X-rayed this morning, what's the matter? You're not going to believe this, but it's carrying a gun." So, and then it just ends with Khonshu. He's the statue just looking on ominously. A nice little dark story. It was cool. I have nothing against it. I like the concept and the idea of Herb Russell just being locked away forever. It confused me a little bit at the end. Like, bear with me. I would have loved it if, say that the coffin, the sarcophagus got jammed shut with him in it, and then you go like years and years later on, or like into the future, and something like not even seeing the gun, but kind of like they do the X-ray and they see that the bones are like perfectly preserved or something, just to give you that sense that what's happened to this mummy? How come it's perfectly preserved? Because for me, the fact that they reveal the gun, like just the way that my head works is that, okay, that's the end of the story, but then after the story, wouldn't they then just open up the coffin and see this dead guy? And, it kind of dispels that whole supernatural mystique and macabre kind of tale for me. But anyway, that's just me. So a nice little story to back up. And speaking of this little story, because it does tie in to our quotation mark, our feedback, and got some feedback on our Facebook group by Jonathan Sapsid. So hello, Jonathan, a valued patroni, awesome member of the community. And Jonathan writes in about issue 21. He said, "A breather for Bill Sienkiewicz, and the art's quite a departure, but is interesting with the voodoo iconography. It's all live and let die voodoo cliche, even down to the crocs." I couldn't agree with you more. Brother Voodoo's always fun though. Agreed too. It seems Mooney's doing a little moonlighting with the Merc business, but we see he's not really in it for the money in the end. The best thing is the cover by Bill, one of the several striking classics in the 20s. Oh, and the Zelenetz story is really good. Is this Khonshu's only solo story ever? So I wanted to address that first, Jonathan. And I don't know, you may have done a little bit of digging yourself, but I did on Wiki Fandom. So this is indeed like the first backup story of Tales of Khonshu, and it continues in issue 22. and then it stops. So a short-lived little idea from editorial or Doug Moench or whomever. I would have loved to have seen it carry on, similar to, those backup stories of Mark Spector before he was Moon Knight and as a mercenary. I just love the kind of pulpy and the opportunity to explore these different genres with Moon Knight in these backup stories. I just love it. So having said that, I can't wait for the Moon Knight annual, which incidentally I forgot to add in the news. I think Jed had released a preview, or there are previews of the pages for Moon Knight, the Moon Knight annual. So go check that out too. But thank you so much, Jonathan. Very much so. You're right though. He's not really in it for the money in the end, because he gives all the money, he donates it all away. It's illegal Haitian, funds procured from the government. So yeah, he does absolutely the right thing. But for me, he did seem to relish the idea of making a bit of money on the side at the beginning. So I don't know. I don't know what you make of that. But no, thank you very much, Jonathan. Well, Looney listeners, that pretty much wraps it. You're probably bored to death. You're probably in your own sarcophagus now, wishing that I was an Iron Maiden after listening to Ray for, the good part of an hour or just under an hour. But thank you for sticking around. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope, to make it even better, I hope you pulled out your copy of issue 21 and just kind of followed along. It's always fun to do these classic, reviews and classic runs. Spectacle, before we go, I just want a couple of things, shameless self-promotion. So most recently, the latest To Know Her Is to Fear Her Spider-Woman podcast episode has been released, episode 30. So Saren and I get to chat about Bendis, issue 2 of his Spider-Woman origin run, which is a fantastic run. So you've heard me, poke fun at Brian, but he truly is a master of his game when he's on his game. And he certainly is so with Spider-Woman Origin. So we do issue 2 there. We have a good look. That's the second episode for the month for To Know Her Is to Fear Her. We're trying to go fortnightly, which is fun for us. It's all about just finding the right time. And also as well, recently released is our second official episode of Predator and Prey. It's the latest podcast show that I have the absolute honour and privilege of doing with Russell and Justin. You would know them as fellow loonies as well, but they're also podcasters in their own right. Hosts to Gamma Charge, the strongest podcast there is. I can't do it as well as Justin. And Tomes of Evil here and there is a Hobgoblin Historia, I should say, as well. But yeah, on Predator and Prey, we have a fun time talking about Predator, the original movie, 1987 with Arnold Schwarzenegger, as well as Ed Brisson's issue 2 of Predator with Kev Walker, very cool, and chapters 4 to 6 of the latest anthology novel, Eyes of the Demon, all Predator stories. So continuing that, we did the first 3 chapters back in our first episode. Next phase is episode 304, and it so happens that after a waning crescent, you generally get a waxing crescent. So if you look up into the night sky next week, it will be a waxing crescent, which means it's another LUNAR-PICK, but it's a modern run review. And this time, I had to do a bit of checking as well, because it's been a while. It will be Moon Knight Volume 6, Issue 12, which is the finale of Bendis' run. Coincidentally, I was just talking about Bendis. So we'll wrap up that series finally. As for co-host TBA, I'll be hopefully just asking around, and again, it's all to do with timing and schedules. Hopefully we can make it happen. Otherwise, it's going to be another solo outing from yours truly. A big thank you to our patroonies once again. each and every one of you. You too can support the show. Check out all the bonus incentives, all that sort of stuff on patreon.com/ITK Moonlight. And the people that have already done that, and a huge thank you to, are at Odin, Daniel, Drew, Frank, Justin, Derek, Wayne, Josh, Anthony, Russell, Michael, Mario, Matthew, and Jonathan. Thank you, each and every one of you. You guys rock. It's really cool to be able to do a show that supports itself just through the love of this character. So thank you so much. Speaking of principal sponsors, some of the top tier patroonies, a big shout out to Odin Odensword and his podcast, Drinking Marvel Podcast. Frank, the Think Tank Dukes, is on Instagram. Check out Moonlight Visions, that's with a Z. Daniel Doing, who you've probably heard many times, a long time patroony, and his Fringe Night. He actually did, he attended a con recently, posted it up in the group, with his original indie-based comic book character, Fringe Night, Pennsylvania's very own mysterious superhero. Patreon.com/Fringe Night 27 is where you can catch and support Daniel with his independent creations. Drew Toombs, such a fun, awesome fella. I know he's been loving the likes of She-Hulk and looking forward to Werewolf by Night on Disney+. You can catch Drew's awesome music, and he's got 2 sites for that, namely on SoundCloud, soundcloud.com/Toombs with a Z, and his other moniker, Lurk Music. So Lurk Music with a CK at the end, .bandcamp.com. Well, again, all these will be in the show notes, so you can just click the links. CLZ Comics, a big thank you to them. They're at collectors.com. Go check it out. I'm absolutely loving this database. Seriously, I'm not just saying that. I refer to it almost on a daily basis. I like to keep my collection up to scratch, up to speed, recorded. You know, I know which ones are bagged and boarded. I know comics that I've like paid for and are waiting to arrive. I know which ones I've ordered, so I can keep a tab of that, and then I just flick them off into collection once they arrive. It gives a good track of, because I don't know about you, sometimes you tend to buy, you go a bit crazy, you buy a lot of stuff, and you kind of forget what you buy. So this is a good way of keeping track of that. And finally, Dreamland Comics, use the code MOON and you get 20% off their online store. Finally, a big thank you. We are part of the collective like-minded podcasters. As I mentioned, there were a couple of there before. Gamma Charge, the strongest podcast there is. I'm going to shout out EMP, Earth's mightiest podcast. And, of course, the boys over at TV Podcast Industries. They're on holidays at the moment. A big hello. Hope you're enjoying Dubrovnik. I think I saw John and Derek, loving your work, loving your shows. Hope you're having a good time too. Finally, you can email us at feedback@itkmoonlight.com. We've got a website, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Discord, Get Vocal, and Podchaser. All of those links are in the show notes. That pretty much wraps us. Loonies, thank you so much. I hope you're still with us. I hope you haven't fallen asleep. If you have a gentle slumber, and hopefully when you wake, you'll be refreshed and revitalized. But with that, may Khonshu watch over the denizens of the night. Catch you later.
Moon Knight and affiliated characters, stories and events are properties of Marvel Characters Incorporated. Materials used and discussed within the podcast are intended for critique and review purposes only under the fair dealing concept of the current Copyright Act. The views, information or opinions expressed during the podcast are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent those of the copyright owners.